let's get it back to fall camp. Billy Napier speaking to the media a couple of days after the Saturday scrimmage. So let's hear Napier on the scrimmage and the latest on DJ Lagway.
Our team, this is a critical week. You know, it's a really, really important week in training camp. We have to do our best work this week. And, you know, it's one thing to practice like you want to win. It's another thing to practice like you want to win a championship, right? So the level of detail this week has got to ramp up. The quality of the execution has to improve. But in general, you know, I think that this group has taken the right approach. I've been very pleased. You know, we had Shep in here last week. He did a great job. He talked about getting the big rocks in early. And you guys have all seen that video online, the viral video. And I think it's important for our players to evaluate themselves and have the self-discipline to put together a plan for their day, you know, plan out their work and then go work their plan. I think the chemistry of this team has impressed me, and overall like the attitude of the team. You know, in terms of the scrimmage, you know, status quo. You know, when you're pleased with one side, you're not pleased with the other. So pretty back and forth. For the most part, came out of it pretty healthy. Just your typical bangs and bruises. So in general, we're back at it. And I thought we started the week with some juice today.
When you say like one side and not like the other side in the scrimmage and so forth, in your opening statement, I mean, is there a certain side that's ahead right now, offense ahead of defense, defense ahead of offense, or how do you view it?
I think defensively, probably a little bit further ahead just because of the, you know, I think we're without a few players on offense, right? So I think that affects our ability to perform. But today, the offense won, right? So I think the defense had some rookie players that had to emerge in the two deep today and had to take reps. And I think they felt the urgency of having to perform when the spotlight was on. So, look, I think when you're evaluating, you're playing against yourself, it's important. I told the team on Sunday, you know, look, I think before we start this 56-play cut-up, you know, let's preface this with when I'm complimenting one side, typically the other side is contributing to that. So we need to eliminate the negative plays on offense, and we need to eliminate the mental errors and missed tackles on the defensive side. I think, and then overall, the quality of the execution, the attention to detail, the synchronization of the play, right? I think all those have to improve, and we're on schedule there.
How about DJ on schedule? How close is he to the full workload? But game Saturday, you're opening Saturday. Was he ready?
Yeah, we don't play Saturday. But
how close is he?
I think he's doing great. I think he's on schedule. He's executing our plan. You know, I think he had a great day today. I think he had his best day today. He took more reps today than he's been taking. Obviously, he didn't participate in the scrimmage, but he's hitting all of his numbers from a throw perspective. The ball's coming out of his hand with more velocity than any time in his career. You know, I think he's just obviously. We're working on the soft tissue with the calf, and we're gonna execute our plan there.
All right, well, executing the plan there with DJ Lagway, and nice little update there, of course, you know, throwing more than he has. And, of course, I mean, we've talked about this. Dating back to spring, fall camp, and with the calf injury now, and, you know, it's just kind of, he's a star of college football. I know some people may be tired of hearing about this side of DJ Lagway, but there's an update from the head coach, and somewhat doing more than he has been, and nice velocity on the ball. Seeing what you need to be seeing. I think you'll probably wrap it up 11-on-11 work pretty soon, if not today, in that practice setting. So we can go in many ways with this. First of all, I know we kind of joked before we came on here. Practice to win a championship. That was, hey, forthcoming. I know I put out a tweet today asking people what they thought of, the scrimmage or what Napier had to say about the scrimmage. And that was one quote that did catch some people's ear when Napier talking about, kind of the practice to win a championship is a whole lot different than just going out there and practicing. It's a whole different threshold that a team has to meet to meet those type of expectations. So hopefully it's not just lip service. We'll find out in these 12 games coming up this fall. But that takeaway, the Lagway takeaway, and they're pretty much just going against each other. When something good happens on one, it's bad with the other. There with the big takeaways, we'll get to some more takeaways, but that was the kind of the sound that I wanted to put out from Napier today.
Yeah, well, that's throwing down the gauntlet, isn't it, buddy? That's one where, not ambiguous at all in terms of his expectations and what they're chasing after. And good. That's what you should be chasing after at Florida. The expectation is championships. And that's why it's been disappointing that the team is 17-17 in his tenure. Now, those are big words for a guy who's 17-17 in his tenure so far. And those are big words for like all the stuff about executing their plan and that they're on a good path and all that sort of stuff is a little bit muted by the fact that they have the Sharks and then South Florida to start the season. And so, they're not necessarily jumping right into the Hurricanes or jumping right into the Utes like they had the first 3 years of Billy Napier's career. But, that plan hasn't been ready week one the last couple of years. And so, to me, that's the thing is he's talking about eliminating mistakes and missed tackles on defense and missed assignments. He's talking about eliminating the negative plays on the offensive side of the ball. Certainly the conundrum for fall camp and even spring camp as well. We always talk about spring lies, fall lies is, you never know. Is the defensive line dominating because the offensive line terrible? Or is the offensive or, are the defensive players actually really that good and they're going to cause problems when it comes to end season? So a lot of that is sort of, he even mentioned that, sometimes, if the offense is doing something bad, the defense happens to come up with a win. So, look, I think talk is cheap when you've got seasons below 500 under your belt, when everybody is like thrilled with an 8-5 season, right? Like 8-5 last year. And, you and I my preseason magazine has Florida in the playoffs. So it's not like I don't see the path to this. Mm-hmm. And it's not like I'm not excited about where we're going. What I will say is that, you should probably be practicing like it's for a championship, like day one when you come into the program, right? Like in fact, that's one of the things that might disturb me a little bit about that statement. Again, I think in some ways it's just setting the tone for the season. But, I'm a big believer in you practice the same way, regardless of whether you think you have a chance to win a championship or you don't, because that's how you get there, right? You build those habits year after year, practice after practice, day after day, week after week. And so hopefully that's what he's talking about, is building those habits early on in August, so that when it comes time in October where they're putting in the practice time during the week, that the expectations from the staff for the players and from the players for the players are set and established so that they can hold each other accountable. Because let's be honest, the coaches can do a lot in terms of setting the tone and the vision and that sort of stuff. But the reality is that you watch like that Swamp Kings documentary, they weren't talking about, Billy Gonzalez holding the wide receivers accountable. Like they were talking about, Brandon Seiler coming in and like motivating everybody for the entire team. And that's really what you need. You need those leaders on the team to step up, understand what the expectations are, and then hold everybody accountable. And that's how you build championship practice habits in a championship team. And hopefully that's what we're going to see coming up this year.
Yeah, something I think they, unfortunately, but I'm still grateful, I think they learned when, maybe we make too much of it, but go back and, circling that first bye week after last year. And look, we've heard the players mention it, and the coaching staff kind of just admit and mention it as well, that, hey, we had to change some things. And maybe it wasn't there. The first few years under Napier, and something needed to change, and we go back and circle that time. If Napier goes on to be here for quite some time, I think we will go back and look at the first bye week in the 2024 season because I don't think it is lip service. I mean, we've heard it from the players, we've heard it from the coaches. I don't think it's been drilled into their heads that, hey, this is what you talk about. No, I think there was some philosophical shift. It sucks they had to learn it, that it took 2 years to learn what the process needed to be, but at least somewhat now that there's something they can go back to say, hey, that's what we need to do. This is how we need to practice. This is how we need to approach our program moving forward. And maybe that is the practice like a champion, type of mentality that they found in that first bye week last year. So look, even that could be lip service. I think it played a ton of difference last year. Does it pay a ton of difference this year? And it's one of those things that has to carry over from last year to this year. I think it was a moment in time that you circled. I think it did mean a lot. Will it carry over?
Well, so there's a couple things there, or a lot of different things there. One is, I think it actually highlights maybe one of the biggest criticisms of Billy Napier is that if you think back to the Urban Meyer era, like in the bye week before the Georgia game in his first season, he's like, all hands on deck. It's not going well. And there were like 7-1 at the time or something like that. And he's like going crazy and calling people in and making changes. And they bring in the fullback in that game against the Bulldogs and, installed new stuff. And I think setting the expectations that there's going to be urgency and that there are going to be expectations are important. So yeah, it's taken Napier and his staff a little bit longer to get to that. I would not underestimate the fact that they essentially shelved Austin Armstrong after that bye week as well. That Ron Roberts, I think it was one game after the bye week, they asked Napier who was calling the plays, and he said Ron Roberts. But there's a philosophical shift on defense as well. But also, I think in many ways that philosophical defense was tied in with, look, Roberts seems kind of like a hard ass and seems like somebody who isn't going to take missed assignments. He's going to simplify things. But now you have no excuse to make a mistake, right? Can't be like, oh, that guy next to me didn't do what he was supposed to do, so I was covering for him or something like that. It's like, nah, you got one job here. We're playing cover 2 or cover 4. Like, that's all we got. Like, we're not doing anything. Go win the rep. And the minute they started saying that, it's funny because other than the Texas game, and that does sort of cloud my overall thought process and all of this stuff, but other than the Texas game, what really happened from that bye week on is Florida started winning way more reps than they had been winning the previous 4 weeks. That, it wasn't this sort of tentative, like, well, we gave up 5 yards on that run. No big deal. 2nd and 5. It's like, no, we're actually going to win on first down. We're going to have some tackles for loss. We're going to, take on a double team and drive them into the backfield. Like guys like Pyburn, guys like Gates, like those guys really came on with an attitude that I think the team needed. So, the team kind of took on the attitude that I think was established during that bye week, but that only matters if things change, right? Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, Urban Meyer years ago pulled everybody aside during the bye week and probably made it hell for all those guys on the team during that week. And, took Napier a couple of years, but that might be the thing in the documentary, 20 years from now when they're talking about, the Billy Napier era at Florida and how we almost ran him out of town, myself included. They're going to be like, people just needed to be more patient with him. He knew what he was doing. He was building this whole thing. It's like, I don't know. I think in some ways there was some desperation there after the Blitzkrieg against Texas A&M.
Yeah.
And, it was like, to your point, like there was finally an acknowledgement of this, hey, we have a plan. We're going to execute a plan. It's like, well, the plan hasn't worked the first 3 weeks of the season or the first 4 weeks on defense. Maybe we ought to find a different plan. And, they made an adjustment, maybe a series of adjustments, and it paid off. So we shall see, right? There's one of the things that I highlighted in the preseason magazine was that to go from 6-6 or 5-7 to 8-5 is a pretty small jump in points for versus points against. Like there's not a huge difference in terms of point differential. Now you're a better team when you're 8-5, no doubt, but it's a relatively small switch. Like you can make changes around the edges and improvements around the edges and make that change. Going from 8-5 to 10-2 is a much bigger jump than going from 4-8 to 8-5. Like it's just the reality. And so Florida has to make a bigger jump this year than they did last year. But again, look, you got to build somewhere. You got to start somewhere. And if they got those practice habits built in last year, then good. They were able to establish that, it's no longer the players then trying to buy into, or the coaches trying to get the players to buy in that this stuff will work. The players have now seen it work, which means, again, those guys holding each other accountable to a certain standard starts to become the thing you look for because they've all seen it work and they've seen what doesn't work. And so if they see someone heading off in that direction, they hopefully will be able to come beside them and help course correct.